very glad that you have taken interest in studying the environmental pollution. Now, when we talk about the environmental pollution, it includes air pollution, land pollution, as well as marine pollutions. You must be aware that today the environment has become the important subject, and I am sure that every one of us should be aware what is going on in today's environment. Now I'll be mainly talking on the marine pollution, that is the pollutions which is related to the marine waters. Now what is meant by the pollutions, or what is meant by the marine pollutions? In general, I can say that the marine pollution is the one that brings the changes mainly due to the man-made effects. Or in detail, if you want to know, it can be defined as the introduction by the man, directly or indirectly, mainly due to the substances or the energy which can cause harmful effects to the living organisms, mainly the fish or the benthic community, or which can cause the harmful effects to the human life. Now let's have a look. What are these pollutants that can cause damage to the marine life, or that can cause damage to the marine environment in general? Let's have a look. There are different types of sources of marine pollution which can cause damage to the marine environment. Now the pollutants include such as dumping of domestic sewage, sludge and waste, dumping of industrial waste, sewage and solid waste from the ships, dumping of dredge spoils, that is the sediments arising from the dredging activities. Oil, you must be knowing that today the oil pollution has given the vital importance, mainly because it causes the maximum damage to the environment. Now this oil pollution can occur from drilling or production of platforms, oil from tanker cleaning and deballasting, oil spills from shipping accidents. Then come the sediments from the overland runoff, heat pollution, or in other words thermal pollution, anti-fouling paints, ship breaking activities, and the pollutions caused to the developmental activities. Now all these things which have been mentioned just now are the major pollutants. Let's have a look in what way they can cause damage to the marine environment. The first one is domestic sewage. It can enter the marine environment, or it can enter the coastal waters either by direct disposals through the ocean outfalls, or from rivers and streams, or from stormwater runoff. Now what are its contaminants, or what are the substances that are present in the domestic sewage that can cause harmful effect on the marine life as well as human? They are mainly pathogenic organisms, then nutrients, then biodegradable organics, and suspended solids. Now let's have a look in what way these substances can cause damage to the marine environment. First one is suspended solids. It can lead to the development of such deposits which may bury benthal organisms. Now the benthal organisms are the community which are lying on the seabeds, and if there is excess of suspended solids, it can bring the mortality, or it can bury the entire benthic community. Then it can fall gills of the marine fish, thus causing damage to the marine organisms. And reduces sunlight penetrations. You must be knowing that sunlight is an important factor for the phytoplankton productions. And if there is enough suspended solids, then sunlight may find difficult to enter the marine environment, thus hampering the process of phytoplankton or production. Biodegradable organics. It may lead to the reduction of dissolved organics. Now how this process takes place? Now this organics reduces the dissolved organics which is present in the marine environment. Thus it leads to the deficiency of the oxygen which is essential for the marine organisms to survive. Then pathogens. These are the disease, so-called, these are the organisms that can lead to the sort of diseases such as diarrhea and so on. And these disease can come, or this may be transmitted to the humans by ingestion of contaminated seafood, or possibly by the taking a bath into the infected coastal waters. Then nutrients. It may lead to the heavy growth of planktonic and attached algae and eventually eutrophications. Now you must be knowing that presence of phytoplankton or zooplankton is a must, and this is formed generally by the presence of nutrients. Then persistent organics. These are mostly the pesticides which are very harmful pollutants, and in several ways it can cause damage to the marine organisms. Then heavy metals. There are different types of heavy metals, or rather toxic metals, mostly lead, cadmium and mercury. Now all these metals are present in the seawater, but when their quantity exceeds the limit, then it can cause damage to the marine organisms. At times it can bring down the mortality to the organisms or the fish that is surviving in the coastal waters. Then the sewage sludge is nothing but the solid sludge separated from the domestic wastewaters, and it does have the same problems as that of domestic sewage. Only the difference is this is a solid waste, and the one which I explained earlier is a waste in the liquid form. Then comes in industrial waste. You must be knowing that most of the industries are located in the coastal belt. It's mainly because they can discharge the effluent directly into the sea waters, or they can take the sea water required for their cooling purposes. Now when I say that they can discharge the effluent directly into the sea water, that doesn't mean they can discharge directly. For that the treatment process or the treatment plant is necessary. They have to bring down the levels of the pollutants present in the sewage to a certain limits, and then only they need to be discharged. Now for this method they need to carry out a sort of EIA studies, that is the environmental impact assessment, which gives all the details to what extent or where the effluent should be discharged. Now let's have a look what does it contains, or what are the pollutants that are present in the effluent discharge. It contains the toxic metals, acids, bases, then the heavy metals or the toxic metals, oil and grease. All these pollutants should be brought down to a certain limits which is tolerable to the fish. Then comes shipboard waste. Now we have got different types of the vessels, mostly oil tankers and the cargo ships, and all these vessels do have shipboard waste. And as such, this shipboard waste includes sewage, garbage and oily waste from engines and bilge. And all these things need to be treated before it is discharged into the marine environment. If it is discharged as it is, then it can cause pollution into the marine environment. That's why a treatment plant is a must on every ship, whether it's a cargo ship, whether it's an iron ore carrier, or whether it's a oil tanker. Then in what way this shipboard waste can cause damage to the marine environment? Falling of beaches. All the beaches which are considered important from the point of tourism are being damaged. Then falling of trolling nets and ship propellers. These are the nets which are used for catching the fish. Then clogging of water intake pipes. There are intake pipes required for the thermal power plant or other industries which take the enough seawater for their cooling purposes. Now the waste discharged from the ships can block the inlet of these pipes. Then navigational hazards due to large floating debris. Now most of the ships require the channels which are free from the pollutants. And then mortality of marine mammals. Now the dredge spoils. Now although this is not a major pollutant, but still then it can cause damage to certain extent. Now what is a dredging? Now dredging is a must in almost all the harbors or in the port areas. Now in the harbors and port areas we get the ships of different sizes. As such we need to keep the channel intact. Now the dredging is a process whereby these bottom sediments are being removed and then dumped at some other sites. Now while carrying out these activities we need to carry out a sort of scientific studies which gives us details to what extent dredging should be carried out, and where the dredged material should be dumped. Now when we remove the bottom sediments due to the dredging process, it contains so many toxic substances which are again harmful to the marine fish. Then we are dumping the sediment load or suspended solids somewhere else. So we have to see that the place identified for dumping should not have any benthic community. And for that again a scientific study should be carried out. So all these things should be done in neatly and scientific way. Then only we can avoid the damage to the marine environment. Then the sediments. Now the sediments from land runoff amount to about almost 500 million tons per year. Now this material settles into the estuaries and nearshore areas, and it can cause damage to the marine life by burying or clogging their gills or filtering organisms. So if there is enough suspended load, then as I said, we have got enough benthic community in the coastal waters which is lying on the seabed. And as such, this additional suspended load can bury this benthic community, or it can cause damage, or even it can cause mortality to the fish or the benthic community. And to avoid this, we require a proper type of management, that is proper land use management to reduce the amount. Then the thermal pollution. This is a sort of heat pollutions, and it's mainly arising from the thermal power plants. Now the thermal power plants require huge quantity of seawater for their cooling purpose. Now when they take the water from intake pipe, the temperature is something else, but when it is discharged, the temperature is always higher than what is existing in the normal seawater. However, this discharging this hot water, the temperature should be brought down to the normal so that it cannot cause any damage. If it is discharged with the same temperature, then definitely it can cause damage to the marine fish, or there is every possibility because of this activity or because of the higher water temperature, the fish can migrate from that place to another place. Then there are anti-fouling paints. In fact, this is a major source of trace metals or heavy metals in waters and sediments near docks and marines. Now what are anti-fouling paints? These are the paints which are applied to the bottom of the hull in order to avoid corrosion. But it does contains so many toxic substances. Mainly it contains chromium, then lead and so on. Now these are the ones which are considered to be the major pollutants, and as such to some extent it can cause damage to the fish or the marine organisms. Then the ship breaking activities. This is a sort of newly activity that has come into the force. Now all the ships which are being unused, that can break into different parts, but while breaking these things, mostly the trace heavy metals, iron, then copper, all these things come into the marine environment, and as I said earlier, this can cause damage by fouling the gills of the marine fish. Then developmental activities. Now developmental activities are a must if a country wants to increase their revenue. Now these developmental activities mostly include the construction of the ports and the breakwaters. Now while carrying out or while construction of such activities, it can alter the sediment transport or thus causing the erosion and accretions. In order to avoid this, we need to carry out a sort of scientific studies or the modeling studies well in advance so that we can avoid the erosions. Now apart from this, I have mentioned ship breaking activities as one of the pollutants, then domestic sewage, dredging activities. Apart from that, there is another major pollutant, that is the oil. Now oil is considered as the major pollutant of the ocean. Oil pollution can occur anywhere into the marine environment, wherever the oil is produced, transported or stored at sea. That means as long as oil activities are going on, this oil pollution will take place. Now what are the causes of the oil pollutions? Now the oil pollution can occur either due to the collision of the two tankers or the grounding of the ship, or due to the activities carried out at the oil platform. Now we'll see in what way the oil can cause damage to the marine environment. Now the oil can cause damage to the marine life, it can cause damage to the benthic activity, it can cause damage to the marine seabirds, it can cause damage to the beaches. Now let's have a look what exactly happens to the oil spill takes place on the sea surface. The moment the oil spill takes place on the sea surface, it undergoes several processes, both chemical as well as physical. Now all these processes combined together is known as the weathering process. This process includes spreading of the oil, evaporation of the oil, sinking of the oil, biodegradation of the oil, then emulsification of the oils and so on. So in general, the end product of the oil is the tar balls. Now tar ball is nothing but it's resulting from an oil spill. And these tar balls usually we find floating on the sea surface. It's only during the monsoon when the currents are onshore, the tar balls are being washed to the nearby beaches. And thus these tar balls or the presence of the tar balls in the beaches, which are considered important from the point of tourism, then in such cases we can lose tourism activities, or it can cause a sort of ugly appearance to the beaches. Thus we can lose the tourism industries. Now there are different ways by means of which these oil pollutions can be tackled. Now whenever oil spill takes place, as I mentioned, it can cause damage to the marine environment. So the best thing is we need to act on the spill at the earliest before it causes maximum damage. Now there are different types of equipment available. They are known as skimmers, booms, dispersants. Now the first thing what we need to do is try to contain the spill by means of spreading the boom, so that the oil is contained in a certain area. It's not being allowed to spread, because the more it is allowed to spread, the more it can cause damage, or more we need to have the manpower, the equipment. So the best thing is the moment the spill occurs, we try to contain by means of booms. Now booms are nothing but the barriers which can act as a preventive measures or which can prevent the oil from spreading. Once you have contained the oil within the booms, the next step is how to skim up or how to get rid of the oil. For this we got the equipment such as skimmers, and we have to put the skimmers into operations. Thus we can get rid of the things. But sometimes we have seen that in the rough weathers or in the high seas, all these things cannot give the maximum efficiency. So in that case we go for the dispersants. Now what are dispersants? Dispersants are nothing but a sort of chemicals, and which breaks the oil into droplets, and thus it prevents damage to the marine environment. Once the oil is broken into droplets, it is being consumed by the bacteria. If you allow the oil in the form of film, then it can prevent sunlight penetration, it can prevent atmospheric oxygen, it can it formulates a sort of emulsions which are very dangerous to the marine life, or it can block the gills of the marine fish. So the best thing is you go for spraying the dispersants and thus allow the oil to break into small droplets. And here we have got a national agency which is known as Coast Guard. It is the agency which is mainly dealing with the prevention of the spills, and NIO is also involved in that. Mostly whenever the oil spill occurs, we come into the picture as far as to study the long-term effects of the oil spills in the water, in the sediments, or in the marine fish. Now let's have a look why we consider the coastal ocean to be an important phenomena. It's mainly because this region is of very high physical energy and biological diversity. That means we have got enough sources from the coastal waters. It occupies almost 18% of the Earth's surface and 8% of the ocean surface. So you can imagine to what extent it can be considered as important. Global primary productions occurs in the coastal oceans. 85 to 90% of the world fisheries productions is derived from exclusive economic zone. Now what is exclusive economic zone? Now every country has got its exclusive economic zone. As far as we are concerned, as far as India is concerned, our exclusive economic zone is something like 200 nautical miles on either side of the coast, that is on the east coast or the west coast, and in future we may still extend it, and this is given or this is decided by the United Nations. 90% of the land-based pollution, including sewage, nutrients and the toxic materials, remain in the coastal ocean. That's why the coastal ocean is considered to be a very sensitive zone, and where we have got enough resources, we have got fishing activities is there, we can utilize this water for the agriculture, for the drinking purposes, this same water can be utilized for the industrial purposes and so on. Today the pollution has become very important subject. In fact, this subject is implemented right from the beginning to the college levels. Every one of us should be aware why we should not have the pollutions. Just now I have mentioned what are the different pollutants and in what way they can cause or they can damage the marine environment. Not only the marine environment but even the other environments. As I said, pollution can be also occur from the air pollutions, land pollutions and so on. Now in this 21st century, it's not only the government but even there are NGOs and who are aware or who are taking lot of interest in order to avoid the pollutions. The basic fault lies with us. We should be, every one of us should take care not to pollute anything. For example, let's take an example of our home garbage. You must be aware now garbage has become a common problem everywhere. So in order to avoid this, what is the most important is preventive measures. Now I am sure that you will pass this message to your other colleagues, and thus while in such a process we can make our country pollution free country. So we have seen what is exactly meant by the marine pollutions. We have seen the different types of pollutants. What are their effects on the marine environment, including marine life, benthic community, beaches and so on. We have also seen how we can avoid this pollution. There are different techniques. For example, industrial waste can be avoided if they are discharged after by the treatment process. As far as the oil is concerned, soon after the oil spills, what is the most important is we need to tackle it within a short period of time. That means we can minimize pollutions. See, when we talk about the pollutions, for example, for a country like India, if you want to increase our revenue, we need to have industries. And when we are going to develop the industry, definitely to certain extent there will be pollution. We cannot bring the pollution to the zero order level, but definitely we can minimize the pollution by sort of having proper management plan. And management plan is almost every state is having its plan, and there are bodies which have been set up by the government known as coastal zone management bodies. These are the bodies which are responsible for preventing different types of pollutions. So I am sure whatever I have explained that you will make thorough use of it, and you will also pass on this message to your colleagues so that we can have a sort of free pollution atmosphere.